This episode of Film Man was pre-recorded on November 15th, 2020. Hey guys, welcome back to Film Man. As always, I'm Connor, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend Dan.
Howdy.
And today, guys, we're doing a little bit of an unorthodox episode.
Yes.
We're going to start with a news rapid fire. I'm doing like an old-fashioned, Old West six-shooter in my hand. Dan is going to list some articles, and then we're going to give our very quick opinions on them before we dive into our tier list, this time focusing on the filmography of George Lucas.
Yes, and specifically the directorial efforts of George Lucas. But here we go with a just current events, rapid-fire news articles. This is an interesting one, at least if you guys have seen these ads for the app Quibi. This is a new article from Wall Street Journal from 2 weeks ago. Quibi was supposed to revolutionize Hollywood. Here's why it failed. And a question, why do you think it failed, Connor? You know, this has been a pretty momentous crashing and burning publicly of this app idea of like 10-minute shorts.
The first thing I want to address is the phrase revolutionize Hollywood. It was supposed to revolutionize Hollywood. It never had a snowball's chance in hell of revolutionizing Hollywood.
Yeah, no.
That is ridiculous. I get that's a clickbait headline. That's for a little boy like me to go tippity-tap on his keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
And the Quibi revolutionize Hollywood. Gee, Mr. Warner, how did I supposed to know? But I think Quibi didn't work because fundamentally no one's really interested in that.
Yeah.
They're trying to appeal to like the YouTube crowd.
Yeah, kind of the idea of like the short attention span crowd of
Yeah.
the generation, but it didn't really.
But people don't go to YouTube to watch clips of a movie and then go to work.
Yeah.
That's not how that works. It's all about personality on the thing. Quibi was a reality platform like they did with Chrissy's Court. That show with Chrissy Teigen, where she's like a Judge Judy-esque figure. And then yeah, maybe. Or if they had more personality-driven content, or if you're trying to appeal to the demographic that loves YouTube, why not have content made by YouTube personalities?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So I think that is a pretty good summation of why Quibi has been such a kind of tumultuous journey this 2020. Next up, Suicide Squad 2. 2 hours ago from Pink Villa, Sylvester Stallone joins cast of the superhero movie. Director James Gunn confirms the news. Thoughts?
I'm happy Sylvester Stallone and James Gunn are working together again. Mm-hmm. If you recall, they worked together on Guardians 2. I'm curious to see who he is playing, or if it's anything larger than a basic cameo.
Yeah.
We do not have a voice for King Shark yet. That is the rumor, at least. Stallone would be a very unique choice to voice King Shark, especially because now we're used to the Ron Funches version of the character.
From the animated show Harley Quinn
Yeah.
on HBO, currently HBO.
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure who he's playing. It's probably just a small cameo. If it is King Shark, I'm very intrigued. Or like he did in Guardians, he played a previous member of the original Guardians in the comics.
Mm-hmm.
He might be playing a small cameo as like an original member of the Suicide Squad back in the day.
Okay, well, we're excited to see what he does.
Yeah.
Next up, Mads Mikkelsen is in talks to replace Johnny Depp in Fantastic Beasts. Thoughts?
Good choice.
I agree. I think that's a really interesting
solid
choice because I think what's special about recasting the Grindelwald character is that we already know him to change faces, so you can just do a really cool casting of that. Like you can have interesting cameos or interesting people. They don't even have to stick with Mads Mikkelsen. They could just keep changing his face if they want to. But it really is a matter of digging into the character itself. Like, can these actors kind of go in and sort of just, I don't know, find the character that isn't directly associated with the face, you know?
Yeah. I kind of hope they lean away from the face changing of it all, though.
Mm-hmm.
I think by getting Mads Mikkelsen, he has enough of a Johnny Depp type. You can just recast and not talk about it.
Yeah.
Because I think the more you delve into the changing faces thing, you give more attention to the Johnny Depp controversy and everything. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's best for Fantastic Beasts, a franchise currently marred in controversy with Ezra Miller, J.K. Rowling, and Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
You just want to distance yourself as much as you can. And I think just Mads is enough a Johnny Depp type where you can play Grindelwald without any kind of like pizzazz to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, this is obviously, it's 2020. This is more based on the coronavirus, but this is at least one article I want to touch on. This title, I think, is an interesting one. Hollywood is finally admitting that the U.S. is a lost cause. Thoughts?
I mean,
And this is from The Atlantic a couple weeks back.
yeah.
Obviously discussing how, the movie industry, theaters, has just been a really bad box office returns, obviously, so with all the theaters
Yes.
closed.
It depends what your sphere is for the U.S. being a lost cause and how you view the film industry as a whole. Here's the thing: Avengers Endgame still made like $1 billion here, something crazy. Black Panther made $700 million here. We're not a lost cause for box office. Yes, do other countries usually dictate the kind of stuff that gets made, especially countries like China? Yes. I wouldn't say we're a lost cause by any means. Obviously, coronavirus doing what it's done to our theater industry is not great, and it's going to fundamentally change how we do movie theaters in the future. I, for one, cannot wait to go back to theaters once they're safe.
Same.
I am
honestly.
ecstatic to go back.
Yeah.
But a lot of people do not share that same sentiment, and movie theaters are going to have to do a lot to recover from this.
Yeah.
And I think as a result, we'll see a slight change in stuff that gets made. Whether or not that's even like, we'll still have like big budget stuff, but big budget stuff may mean $100 million as opposed to $250 million.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Okay, here's one. I think this is from earlier in the year, but is probably still relevant when the Oscars come around. This would be regular Oscar season, but as we know, news of the Oscars kind of extending over into February for which films are going to be eligible. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Netflix spends big for Oscars. Will Hollywood give in?
I don't think it's a matter of giving in. I think Netflix is going to crush the Oscars this year. Just
Yeah.
fundamentally, their release model of things that are released in theaters now, they're just readily available on the Academy streaming service. So Netflix just, obviously, they're producing a lot of great content, but also now they don't have the boundary of theaters to worry about anymore. They can just put stuff on Netflix and have people watch it, and thus it's eligible. And I mean, right now, Trial of Chicago 7, Mank, I believe Pieces of Woman is also Netflix. I could be wrong about that. There's a lot of stuff that Netflix is putting out that is, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom as well. A lot of stuff Netflix is putting out that just happens to be very highly regarded by the Academy Awards this year, at least in experts predicting.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. This is, I think we're going to end on this one just because this is one that kind of caught me. This is from 4 weeks ago, so obviously this is coming in like right before Halloween, to kind of like getting those articles out. This is from Nerdist, Halloween themed. A scientific study has determined the scariest movie ever. And this study was conducted by Broadband Choices. This is actually an article I clicked on. I wanted to see what it is. And it's based on average heart rate across the movie, based on like resting BPM, movie BPM, the difference, and the highest spike. And it looks like the number one is, what is the number one? Sinister from 2012,
right.
director Scott Derrickson, with Insidious at number 2, The Conjuring at number 3, Hereditary at number 4, Paranormal Activity at number 5. So, thoughts?
I remember, I was trying to rack my brain. I do remember hearing about this, that a Sinister was the first one. I'm actually surprised that Hereditary is not number 1, because I have seen Hereditary, and I literally had a panic attack during it. So I'm
Really?
surprised that Hereditary was not number 1. But yeah, and if you're asking this guy over here, Hereditary is the scariest movie ever made.
Here, Hereditary is 4th because the average heart rate was 83 BPM, and the highest spike was 109 BPM for the people being watched. It was a panel of 50 people consuming over 120 hours of horror films, and with their resting heart rates being measured during it. For a little closure on the rest of the top 10, we have number 6, It Follows, which we actually almost talked about for all Halloween movie exchange. Number 7, The Conjuring 2. Number 8, The Babadook. Number 9, The Descent. Number 10, The Visit. Quick question, just while we finish off this little rapid-fire news segment. Why are so many horror films just called The Something? Like, what's up with The Something? Why is it such a minimalist title?
It's ominous,
It's ominous. Do you
and it
think
gets your
that's it?
attention.
Yeah.
Like The Visit, The Village.
Mm-hmm.
The Babadook,
Yeah.
The Cabin in the Woods.
Yep.
It's a bunch of stuff where it just gets your attention very quickly.
That makes sense.
The Friday the 13th,
Yep.
the Halloween,
The Halloween.
you know,
The Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn.
Quinn.
Classic. Classic.
the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, you know. Where are they? That's the scariest part. Where could they be?
Where are they? We don't know. All right, so we're kind of gonna shift gears in a minute, and we're gonna come back after this short PSA break and talk about George Lucas and his directorial efforts. See you in a minute.
Running late to class but still need that morning caffeine or hot breakfast to start your day out right? Download the Bite app by Sodexo and place your custom order for fast, easy pickup at Zyme. Open 8:30 a.m. to 3 o'clock p.m. Mondays through Fridays. Sodexo and Champlain College are also offering residential pick offered in the CCM room for grab-and-go lunches and hot dinner entrees from 11 a.m. through 7 p.m. Monday through Friday. Check out the Bite app for hours and updates.
Hey guys, welcome back to Film and Dan, do you want to dive straight into the filmography of Mr. George, I don't know his initial, Lucas?
I sure do. George Walton Lucas Jr., born 1944, obviously prolific, mostly known for Indiana Jones and Star Wars, obviously, you know. So let's go into it. He has directed 6 movies in the course of his career. At least full-length feature films that we want to highlight here. The first of which is THX 1138, is a sci-fi drama, a very crisp 88 minutes from 1971. So this is a really early George Lucas. I believe this is 4 years after he graduated from film school in LA. A couple years out on his own, putting this movie together. He has Robert Duvall in the leading role with Maggie McComey and Donald Pleasance as well. And Connor, what tier did we give this?
We gave THX 1138 a W for worth a watch.
Worth a watch. And I think that is exactly, that sums it up perfectly. This movie, the directorial debut of George Lucas, THX 1138, worth a watch. I think the biggest thing that stands out to me when considering this film is this is truly George Lucas at his most raw. This is George Lucas at his most experimental, and I think it's also really based on just the text he has. The screenplay he is working with, the concept he has, kind of lends itself to being very experimental and very out there. And I think it's just really cool to see him directing a film in this vein, you know, so early on before he's really kind of come into the whole Hollywood, like the Coppola and Spielberg kind of collective he finds himself in, you know, pre-blockbuster. This is what he was making, and it really is worth a watch.
Yeah. He was supposed to make this before Apocalypse Now, before Coppola took that over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, THX, I don't love it. As I mentioned to Dan earlier, it's a strong 2.5 for me. But even when I think the movie does kind of stumble, I do think it is at least worth a watch. Just see what Lucas was playing around with at this time.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, so much for me is easily like the historical context of the film. It's
Yeah.
like the fact that this was like a very understated moment at the time, but in retrospect is a really cool diversion from what we would see George Lucas to go on to do.
Exactly.
So I'm comfortable giving this a W, despite easily this like not being my favorite of his.
Yeah. Lucas is never like, obviously you'll see by like my opinions on a lot of these movies, he's never been like one of my favorite directors by any means.
Mm-hmm.
Even when I don't think he's a great director, I do think he's a very interesting director.
Yeah.
And this movie perfectly like supplies that information.
Yeah.
Where I'm not really loving majority of the time I'm watching, but I am like visually engaged by anything I'm watching.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with like the design of the police officers in this movie. Me and Steve watched this together and we commented on that. Like the design of the cops in this is incredible.
It really is. I think a lot of the world building I find so interesting because I wouldn't say it's influential, but if he had a bigger budget, if this had a bigger release, this could have been like one of those iconic films. Not one that like stays in the minds of like the Academy, but one that stays in the minds of people where they remember these iconic visuals.
Yeah.
You look back and you just see like kind of like the tunnel scene, the kind of the test medical scene, all of this analog technology in the 21st century kind of surrounding the characters and the police officers for sure. It is so interesting.
Yeah, it's like everyone comments that Blade Runner was a huge inspiration to them.
Yeah,
I think THX could have been that same thing.
absolutely. And another thing I think I want to highlight easily is the action scenes.
Yeah.
It's amazingly raw, like sometimes it's not exactly believable in some ways, but I think when watching some of these scenes like the chase in the tunnel, that scene, I think it makes you wonder like, oh, how did these stunt dudes not get hurt?
Oh no, the stuff in the tunnel with the cops speeding on the bikes. I commented to Steve both times we saw the stuntmen crash.
Yeah,
One amazing stunt performers.
absolutely.
They deserve all the credit in the world. Stunt performers in general, but these guys, especially this isn't a spoiler at all, but one of the cops hits like scaffolding, and the way
that's
he
insane.
flies was insane.
Yeah. And I think, like, is this just an amateur director being reckless, or is this like George Lucas getting amazing performances from stunt people and just having amazing coordination?
Yeah. It could be either thing. Here's the thing, it's kind of a good thing that makes us ask this question because that means the stunt was very effective.
Exactly. I think that's why it works.
Yeah.
So, THX 1138, worth a watch. Next up, we have his next film, American Graffiti, 1973. I think this is the first example, at least, I guess, of him being more in the Hollywood industry scene. This feels like a very sleek movie, very refined compared to what he did with THX. Lucas and obviously Spielberg at this time as well, being the up-and-comers, graduating from film school in the late 60s and coming into the 70s with these ideas that would like define the modern blockbuster, or even the summer blockbuster from the 70s. You have Jaws coming out 2 years after this. So just in terms of George Lucas directing American Graffiti, you have Richard Dreyfuss, Ron Howard. What tier did we give this?
We gave American Graffiti a V.
A V. Very average. And this is I think is quite fitting for this film. I think there's nothing special about American Graffiti when it comes to like the idea of that sort of retro 1950s aesthetic that Lucas is employing here. But it still has some admirable qualities, but it really doesn't stand out.
Yeah, exactly. There's not much this movie offers. And that's the big thing. It just feels like a lot of movies of that time and of that scene, which I think George Lucas was trying to do. He wasn't trying to revolutionize the wheel here.
No.
He just wanted to make a 1950s hangout movie.
Yeah.
And he did that.
He did.
We should correct ourselves. American Graffiti takes place in 1962.
Oh, 1962.
So that tells you how much the movie stayed with us, as we forgot
Yeah.
what decade it was in.
Because 62, was it?
62, yeah.
Would be, the world under Kennedy. This is pre-Vietnam in many ways. It doesn't look too different to us. I think for people, so considering the fact that this movie takes place 11 years before it was made, that, for example, like that would be someone making a movie about 2009 now. It feels less impactful, I guess.
Well, George Lucas, apparently he made it as the thing to reference his not childhood, but his high school years.
His high school years, yeah.
Which made George Lucas 10 years older in my mind, apparently.
Yeah.
But
he would have been 18 in 1962. He was born in 1944, so
Yeah.
So this is directly about like what he grew up with, the culture he grew around.
It's a loving homage to his culture,
his youth culture.
Yes, and a thing where it's just like doing a hangout movie.
Yeah. Moving on, we have probably Lucas's most well-known movie, Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Now, for those of you who don't know, he did not direct Episode 5 and 6. He produced it and obviously was in the creative process. I believe he wrote those too.
I think he co-wrote all
co-wrote
of them. I
all
could be
of
wrong
them.
about that.
But A New Hope is the first one he directed and the only one he would direct until he came back for the prequels, Episodes 1 through 3. So, Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, What tier did we give this?
We ended up giving it an X, Dan.
X for X marks the spot. Exquisite. And I think this movie is definitely deserving of it. I think, personally, I did not grow up with Star Wars. It wasn't a huge staple of my childhood as it was for, I think, kids of that day and those kids who grew up to be parents and then showed their kids who are my friends. So the sheen of Star Wars doesn't come from a place of like childhood wonderment or interest. It comes from me just appreciating the iconics and the optics of what A New Hope meant as a groundbreaking film in 1977, 2 years after Jaws, really solidifying the idea of the blockbuster, the idea of really trying your hardest, 100%, to have the audience lost in the movie. Films like THX 1138, I think, want you to engage in the movie in a sense that you know it is film. You know you're watching cuts. You know you're watching people act. Or someone's trying to construct something. It's more artful in a sense. But this, and along with Jaws, I think two great examples of the blockbuster, are completely meant to just bring you in. And what's interesting is that this is also a sci-fi movie, but it's not your classic 70s edgy, weird synth noises sci-fi movie. This is grand and beautiful. You have John Williams scoring. For that, we give it an X.
Yeah.
Because again, neither of us are huge fans of this film, but
no, as a piece of culture, yeah, New Hope was undeniable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's iconic. And the reason Star Wars is still one of the biggest franchises today is because of like the groundwork that Lucas laid with New Hope. Mm-hmm. And obviously the iconic performances by all three of the main cast.
No, and it's interesting because I feel like our generation can look at the original trilogy as like a package set because they were already made and solidified as a great trilogy. But consider in 1977 when this was the only Star Wars movie that existed. And the fact that it was able to set that stamp and continue on is the only reason that we have more Star Wars movies. And
exactly,
the entire universe expands.
It had to hit the culture exactly at the right moment and redefine the culture to some extent. And that's what it did.
So, yeah. Moving on, this is at quite a jump, actually. Thinking George Lucas almost goes 20 years without directing a film. He goes the entire 1980s, almost the entire 1990s without directing a film until 1999 with Episode 1 of Star Wars, The Phantom Menace. What tier did we give this?
We gave The Phantom Menace a V for very average.
Very average. I think for a lot of people, this won't come as a surprise. This is a very average Lucas directorial project, especially because his time in the 90s and the early aughts with the prequels is so focused on just CGI, computer generated imaging, for a strong majority of the visuals of the film. And I think I feel like a lot of people feel like the technology was not there to make it look good. It could have easily slipped into U tier territory, but I personally gave it a V and stuck to it being a V because it does stand as a really interesting point in George Lucas's career. And out of any film in the prequels, for me, this is the one to analyze and to just look at and marvel at, wondering how this film got made, and looking at like knowing the universe that was created in the original trilogy, coming back 15 years later with this one. I mean, what does that mean, And it's really opened the Star Wars universe up. In many ways, the prequels opened the Star Wars universe up to so much. The fact that we were coming back with more, and the fact that it was so different tonally and visually from the original prequels, it allowed, in a way, Star Wars to not stay in the pocket. It needs to look like this. It needs to sound like this. It made things different. For better or worse, it made things different.
Yeah. So yeah, this movie's not terrible.
No.
I rewatched this and Attack of the Clones pretty recently, and they're not bad movies by any means. I think they're both just incredibly bland.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this movie's kind of fun in parts. The hot take, I don't think Jake Lloyd is bad in this movie either. I think Jake Lloyd is just a kid having a good time, and it works.
Yeah.
It does what it does do. It tells a story. Whether or not you're into the whole politics and trade alliances of the Star Wars universe is a different story.
Yeah.
But it does tell a narrative. It does tell a somewhat impactful one. It is interesting to see the roots of Anakin and the Skywalker family as a whole. Yeah, Padme is cool.
Padme is cool. Padme is cool in this movie and this movie alone. They really don't do justice to Padme in the next two movies. Want to move on?
So on Attack of the Clones.
This is George Lucas's next directorial effort, Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, 2002 film. This comes 3 years after. We have now recast Jake Lloyd as Hayden Christensen, as a kind of teenage or young 20s Darth Vader. They're really stretching the age here. What tier did we give this one?
Dan, through much deliberation and much disagreement, we gave Attack of the Clones a U.
U. And that is mostly because of me. I don't like this movie. No, I do not. No, yeah, we gave it a U. Unfortunate, unfavorable. For me, this is my least favorite of the prequels. Again, it has, I think, a lot of the bland aspects of Phantom Menace and Sith, but with no really redeeming plot points or no redeeming characters, no redeeming, visuals in any sense. It had the potential of the other two, but didn't live up to it, in any way.
Hey, I disagree with you fundamentally, because I also wanted to give this a V. I do think the same issue with Phantom Menace. This movie is incredibly bland, but it is still a good movie underneath that. I like the stuff on the clone planet with building what is his name? The Boba Fett army. Or it's Jango at that point. It's Jango Fett. Yeah, the Jango Fett army. I think that stuff is very interesting. I like the clone troopers as a whole. I think it's an interesting concept. It's the same thing with Phantom Menace. They're both threes. I think they're both solid movies. They're both good. They both work. They're both good movies. It's just a thing where they're just kind of bland, and I think that's just Lucas not knowing how to tell this story. He just he's making a soup, and he just forgot to season the soup. The soup is good. You can tell it's healthy and it's good. It's just it doesn't have any flavor.
Yeah.
And that's the
again,
issue.
yeah, this being a George Lucas tier list, it is the biggest part of George Lucas not knowing how to tell this story. Next up, we have the next installment, Episode 3, this Revenge of the Sith 2005 film, Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, and we're thinking, okay, George Lucas has had two movies. He has really kind of gotten a bigger hold on the CGI technology. It has been improving. At the same time, it's been coming out relatively the same time as Lord of the Rings. Mistakes have been made, but lessons have been learned. So, Connor, what tier did we give this?
Well, Dan, through much deliberation and me coming out victorious, we gave Revenge of the Sith a W for worth a watch.
W tier. I think my biggest issue with this film is still the story and the performances and the direction of George Lucas. Knowing where he needs to go and still falling so flat on landing there anyways.
But as upon my rewatch a couple years ago, this movie actually, to quote the kids, kind of slaps. It's a good, fun time. Well, fun time. The end, it's terribly dark and depressing.
no.
And I do think we actually do get a good performance from Hayden Christensen, and his turn is believable.
No, I can't. I'm sorry. I want to respect your opinion. Obviously, there's a lot of contention here with it, but I strongly disagree. I wanted to give this a T tier as well because this is my second least favorite Star Wars film. I'm happy you can enjoy this movie. I really am.
I just have the high ground.
These scenes, these moments, and even my favorite part of the entire prequel is Ewan McGregor as a whole. I just like him as an actor.
Yeah.
So obviously, you know that from my love of Dr. Sleep.
Yeah.
And also Beginners. I love me some Ewan. But even that, there's so many scenes in Revenge of the Sith that it's the same thing for me with Attack of the Clones. you have these moments, these scenes, these characters that could save the movie, that can make it interesting, but it still falls flat under the superstructure of this really disappointing story, you know?
And I think they do save the movie. I think fundamentally that's where we disagree.
Yeah.
It's because I do think they do save the movie. I do think, well, here's the thing, Ewan is outstanding wherever he goes.
That's true.
And I think Obi-Wan is just as incredible here as he is in the previous two movies.
Yeah, I think he totally does justice to Alec Guinness'
Yes, he
character
does.
for sure. At the end of the day, it comes down to Lucas and how he wrote it and how he created this. Because the dialogue in episode 2 and 3 is, at times, there are some great lines, but there's also just some
Big stinkies.
humdingers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that does kind
That does
of wrap it up. We have the Lucas tier list in its final form. THX 1138,
It's a W for worth a watch.
American Graffiti,
V for very average.
Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope.
X for extraordinary, right? Oh, X marks the spot as well.
Yes. And then for the prequels, Episode 1, Phantom Menace.
Very average.
Episode 2, Attack of the Clones.
Unfortunately, it is a U for unfortunate.
To you. That's generous. And Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith.
As a W for worth a watch.
Worth a watch. Yeah, so that is it for our George Lucas tier list. As always, if you're listening in, what did you think? You know, how would you rank these movies? I think a big chunk of this was on the prequels. What do you think of the prequels? And what does George Lucas as a director, you know, mean to you when you consider, you know, the industry and his kind of defining stamp on it? You know, how does that change how you watch these movies?
And always, guys, thank you for joining us. We hope you tune in next week. If you want to hear what we talked about this week or in the future, you can follow me on Letterboxd at Cranberry18. That is CRANDberry18. Thanks for listening, guys. Goodbye.